digging into the meaning of the parables Jesus told. For example, the parable of the prodigal son we just heard this morning, is to look at the different characters in the parable and ask ourselves, which one of those characters am I most like? And so in the gospel lesson today, we saw the parable being played out. The younger son takes the money and heads off from his father. The older son who stays at home, the father himself. Which one of those characters are you most like? And it can help you think about your own life a little bit. Are we most like the younger son? One way I have to understand what was going on with the younger son, what was kind of the driving force of his life, is that the younger son was hungry for life. Now, that's not a bad thing to be. God gives us life, and God gives us a good life. And so it's quite natural that we're hungry for life, we long for life. Now, the choices that the younger son made about how he would feed that hunger for life were callous and cruel and conniving. The way he tried to pretend that his dad had just died and get the inheritance money and go off and spend it. Those were very bad choices. But his basic hunger for life itself is something that God puts into us. And so one of the things we can ask ourselves as we relate to that notion of being hungry for life is, let's break it down a little bit. What are some of the things that we're hungry for? I think a lot of us are hungry for time. We're hungry for more time. We go through each day, the day is just packed, and we try to get everything done. We get to the end of the day, and time runs out, but there's still more to do. We're hungry for time. There's more that we want to be doing than just the things that we got done in that day. And sometimes it's the problem isn't simply that there aren't enough hours in the day, it's that we feel like we've gotten to a place in our lives where life itself is starting to run out, and it's years, it's even months that we're short of. And so we become very anxious to have more time in our lives. Or another way of thinking about that is we're not just hungry for time, we're hungry for a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. It's not just the quantity of days that we want, it's the quality of those days. And so once again, we race through each day, we get 20, 30, 35, 40 things done in a day. At the end of the day, we come home and somebody asks us, what did you do today? And we can hardly remember what we did today. There were so many things. But the other thing is, we get to the end of the day and we ask ourselves, did I really do anything important today? I want my life to mean something. I want my life to have a purpose. Did I really do anything important with my life today? We're hungry for meaning. I think it's very possible that many of us are hungry for relationship, for friendship. There's a way in which we can feel very lonely at times. We can be surrounded by people, but we still feel so alone. Our modern society has a way of splintering us off from each other, of isolating us. We do our work in cubicles. We communicate by text rather than talking face to face. A family gets up in the morning and everybody heads off in their own direction, and they may not even see each other until that night. It becomes a big thing if a family can just actually sit together at the same time for dinner at night. We're divided into 100 different ways, and so we begin to want friendship. We want to get a sense that we're connected. We want love. We're hungry for love in our lives. And I think finally, the deepest way maybe in which we're hungry, maybe not even always think of it this way, is that we're hungry for God. We're hungry for God. Now we know we come to church each Sunday, and we know about God. We know about God. We have a sense of God. But we're hungry for something more than that. We're hungry for some sense that the God who created the world also knows us. We're hungry for the peace that passes all understanding. We're hungry for a sense of real connection with God. So in a variety of ways, we find ourselves perhaps like the younger son. We're hungry for life, and we're searching for life. And so part of our Lenten reflection, these 40 days of Lent are meant to deepen ourselves, would be to ask ourselves, am I like the younger son? And what is it that I'm hungry for? And how am I trying to fill that hunger? And is it really working out well for me? And then there's the older son. Maybe we're more like the older son. Now the older son in the parable comes across as pretty dour and pretty grouchy about everything, so we probably don't want to be like the older son. But even the older son has some very important things, very good things going on with him. The older son, if we put the best construction on it, the older son had a deep And the older son really wanted to be his best, which was also good. God delights in us when we strive to be our best. The problem, I think, is that in his constant desire to do good and be his best, the older son had sort of hardened into the critic. He was a first-class critic of how people were doing. You know how a movie critic or a play critic, it's their job to look at the actors and to see if they're performing well or not. Well, sometimes we begin to adopt the attitude, or some people do, that a person's worth is based on how well they perform. How well they perform. And so become very critical about how people are doing. And so that's the problem with the older son, is that he developed into a critic. So we have to ask ourselves, are we being a critic towards other people? Is that our primary role with other people? I think it's often hard for us to see ourselves being critical towards others. We're much more sensitive to when others are critical towards us. We can pick that one up right away. What we maybe can pick up is how we're our own self-critic. We can pick up the inner critic inside of us, the voice in us that always tells us we're not performing well enough, we're not doing it okay. I remember my good friend Mike, who I went all through college and seminary with. Mike was a really talented person, was an exceptional person in so many ways. He got straight A's. He was the top tennis player on the college tennis team. He was a handsome, good-looking guy and always dated the cute girls. He was an expert musician. He played the flute in the college orchestra. He was just accomplished in so many ways. And that's what made me all the more surprised when I walked out of the dormitory one day and there was Mike sitting on a bench outside the dormitory. He was looking really down. He was looking really disappointed. And so I walked over to him and I said, "Mike, what's going on? You look kind of sad right now." And he thought for a minute and he said, "I just wish there was one thing I could do really well." Mike was never enough for Mike. No matter what he did, he was never enough. He always saw what he couldn't do. He couldn't see what he could do. He had become the full-time critic of his own self. You could see it in his face. His face was often drawn, and he had a frown on his forehead, and his neck muscles were tense. He'd become an expert self-critic. I suspect that some of us catch ourselves doing that, and the question for us is, if we are expert self-critics, when do we turn that criticism towards others? Is that our basic way of operating in the world? The interesting thing about the older brother is that even though he thought he was the son who stayed close to his father while his younger brother left and was away, in a key way, the older brother was just as far away from his father as the younger son was. It's true that the younger son physically left the farm and traveled to a distant city, and it's true that the older brother stayed there with the father, but in terms of where his heart was in a completely different place than his father's heart was. The older son really didn't understand the father, didn't understand how the father would operate, and so there was this very sad distance between the two of them. So what about the father in the parable? Is that the character that we're most like as we hear this parable being acted out today? People who are scholars of the New Testament, who are experts about what life was